I think part of what people are wrestling with right now is like there's the narrative of AI, and then there's like the reality of AI in terms of like kind of what's built, what's real, where's the value, what's getting deployed. It feels like those two lines on the graph are like wildly out of sync. What are you seeing like in the trenches?
I think the reason the gap feels so wide is that there really aren't a ton of solutions in production. And the reason is there are quite a few barriers to going from what is innovation and experimental in proof of concepts to actually integrating into your data, integrating into your cloud, integrating into your product, and being comfortable putting that in front of customers. And then thinking about rolling out a model, an application at scale, particularly if you're a large company. Let's take MyFitnessPal. You have, tons of users, you have crazy distribution. That means you could have lots of people pinging your model. Well, like how does that factor into the cost that it will take to actually manage this thing? And so what I think people don't realize is like that these barriers to adoption aren't just technical. There are also that there are so many go-to-market considerations that go with building AI products. We talked about some of the differences between building AI solutions and building software on the kind of maintenance and continuous innovation side of it. But it's also in terms of how you really think about your business, is that this isn't just something you slap on because the cost is completely prohibitive unless you are actually getting value from it. And so that means thinking about pricing and packaging in different ways. And so there are lots of people who know how to fine-tune a model. There aren't that many people who know how to fine-tune a model and get the best results from that model, or sort of do the prompt engineering to get the best results. There are fewer people who know how to set up the architecture in a scalable way and integrate at scale. And then there are even fewer who know how to really optimize for cost, and even fewer who know how to really think about not just the technical side, but also the business, go-to-market, and product side of things as well. And since all we do is build AI products, we are continually having conversations not just about the technology, but also the way in which these products will be commercialized. And so thinking about the strategy as well as like the hands-on keyboard implementations of these products is really our sweet spot. And our goal is to narrow that gap for companies getting into production such that we can share with the world these amazing stories of real-world impact that AI is having for businesses. And the reason the gap is so large today is because we don't have a lot of those stories, and our market is so primed to think that everything's a fraud, right? Everyone comes back to crypto, there are no use cases, there's no value here, this is just chatbots. Well, actually, we just don't know that at all. And the use cases I'm seeing are tremendously valuable. It's that they're not in production, and so we don't have data to showcase that yet at scale. And that, I think, is like the massive opportunity in the market, and where Tribe is so uniquely positioned, because we're seeing where there's value. We're building the tools that make it easier for companies to get that value, and we're going to be the first people to see those that value accrued, such that we can then tell those stories in partnership with our customers and help people understand really what the true value of AI can be for enterprise businesses.
How has your understanding or timeline changed since starting Tribe and getting into the weeds versus when it was just kind of a theoretical opportunity?
Timeline for AI adoption?
Yeah, I mean, you just said some people would say that's on a 5-year timeline.
Like
I'm telling you, like, that's happening right now.
I mean, that is happening now. I think where things get trickier is when you're talking about credit card information and purchasing decisions, and use cases that touch fraud, and security concerns. But I mean, the technology exists to be building autonomous agents, and then I think the thing that is the hardest of this is everything else that touches that. How does that impact a business? What is the business model associated with these additional tools? How how does legal get reviewed and involved? Like, what are the risks for the customer? There's sort of all of these other questions that are slowing everything down. But technically, it's possible, and it's very clearly where not just companies are moving from like the startup level and like true innovation in the ecosystem, but it's also where the platforms are moving, with OpenAI GPTs being the most notable of them, which is essentially the ability to spin up agents that are quite easy to build without code.
Was that present when you started Tribe, or is that a whole new, because you've been at this how long?
We started the company in 2019.
Okay. So what was the state of like both the conversation, the narrative, but also like the reality of the kind of market you stepped into back in 2019?
So we never talked about AI. AI was too
really?
too sci-fi.
Okay.
Too Terminator.
Scary.
Yeah, it could be scary or just like far-fetched for people.
Yeah.
But we talked about machine learning and data science. That felt real.
Okay.
And so where we were in the market was I had been at Capital G, which is Alphabet's late-stage growth fund.
Yep.
The companies we were investing in were all asking for help with data science and machine learning. It was really clear to me that every part of Google had been ML or AI or data enabled, and that this was where companies were going.
What were the requests for help that you were seeing or hearing back then?
Hey Google, we know you guys get a lot of value out of this technology. How could we?
Like it was that wide open. How should we be doing more with this?
How do we evaluate data science talent if we don't have any of these people on staff? So we were actually conducting data science and machine learning interviews on their behalf.
At Capital G.
At Capital G, and we would leverage the best engineers and data scientists within Google to do so. So I both got a view into the best talent in the market and kind of divergence in quality, but also understanding of where the problems were in adoption of this technology and why it was the case that Google, Facebook, Amazon, et cetera, were the ones who really had high concentration of applications using data and ML, but very few other companies did.
It was a talent issue at that point.
It was talent and what I would call know-how. The knowledge of how to get value out of this talent and where to direct and apply them.
What did they know or know how to activate in those people, or those, like how did they know how to pair those people with the right problem, like that you saw?
I think in these cases, clearly the companies have been successful. So in Capital G, we're talking about companies like Airbnb.
Sure.
They've become leaders in data-driven tooling and solutions and predictive technology. So the gap actually can be narrowed quite quickly, but it takes a lot of effort. And I think that most companies just aren't willing to do the activation energy or don't have the sort of patience to get over that hurdle.
Was part of it too, like if you're Airbnb, like you're in the middle of all of this commotion, you're watching what's happening at the startup level, you're watching what's happening to your bigger, broader tech. I would imagine the people not as tapped in, there's a bigger issue, which is like they don't even know like the questions to start asking. They don't even they can't even articulate what problem it is they're trying to solve. No?
Completely. I mean, so that was exactly my takeaway. If it's this hard for the Airbnbs of the world, what is everyone else doing? And so I just started by having conversations with execs at large enterprises.
Right.
And the answer was probably not. I mean, it won't be surprising to people. It was a lot of talk and very little action. Oh yes, of course we do data science and machine learning. Cool, what do you do? Well, hand wavy. And so it was clear that there just wasn't adoption. And so we actually spent a lot of our time at this point in 2019 convincing people they had to care about data science and machine learning, that it had to be more than buzzwords, it had to be real things that did things for their business that mattered.
What was your most compelling argument for them to get them to care?
COVID helped in a sense because it rendered all forecasts useless.
Oh, yeah.
And so prediction type use cases off of a data set that no longer was valuable, like kind of changed
That's
the
amazing.
paradigm.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden companies could no longer rely on, their non-predictive but basic Excel modeling,
Sure.
and had to get more sophisticated kind of overnight. Else they just couldn't answer any of the questions that they were being asked by their execs and their board. And so I think that was sort of an early one. Another was sort of anything tied to safety. So let's say like machinery that could break and cause explosions or something. How do we actually
exciting.
how do we think about putting fail-safes in place or being able to predict or monitor when things are going to break, so that we can best focus our effort? I don't know, you think about like PG&E. They can't go around to every single unit install and check what's going on there, or is it at risk of some kind of mechanical failure. But if you had some kind of model that could help focus the energy of the teams to go on site physically to the ones that were the highest risk or the likeliest to start a fire, then you could sort of deploy your resources in a more effective way.
And there was a way to get to that point with machine learning.
With machine learning.
Yeah.
It was, complex
Yeah.
and experimental in many cases, and the deployments took a lot of time. So that's what has changed in a post-LLM ChatGPT world, is that to do an experiment, you basically had to be willing to write more than $1 million check.
Was that your first customer?
I think just what happened eventually to get to something sophisticated. You don't start with $1 million, I think we were ramping. You needed companies to really be willing to invest, and alternatively, companies wanted to experiment. Well, experiments were hundreds of thousands of dollars. Today, with GPTs, you can run an experiment for $50K. So, there's a really big difference. Instead of, you'd have to painstakingly select one use case because you had one shot. Today, a company could run 10 experiments at a time, and that just costs them a few $100,000. And they have clarity on where they should be investing in AI solutions for their business.
When you did that original listening tour, were you still at Capital G, or had you been exploring the market for?
I had been exploring the market. I had high conviction I wanted to start something. And I teamed up with Noah, who's my co-founder. And this sort of kind of came together as the intersection of what we had seen for me at Capital G and for Noah at Gigster, which was sort of Capital G, this idea of a distributed talent network. That's really what Gigster's business model was as well. So, high quality engineers who were doing things in a fraction of their time, but at a really excellent high impact level. And then the idea was, how can we actually leverage those people to solve the barriers to adoption we're seeing in machine learning and data science?
Because the barriers, as you heard them, were not even quite clear how to scope a project.
Art of the possible. Not even knowing what they could be doing, and honing down to what they should be doing.
And was that because they just didn't even have the talent to allow themselves to imagine it?
Yeah, you have software engineers, and this was like a whole other way of thinking about the world. And look, that gap has narrowed. We ran programs where engineers became machine learning engineers. Lots of companies have done that. And then separately, there's been a lot of training out of university on machine learning because it's been a hub of research for a long time. And that is a lot of what has powered, research is fundamentally why we are all in this position with the AI market we have, because that is what led to the transformer breakthrough, led to GPT or ChatGPT, and led to this explosion of potential and use cases that are now made possible in a much simpler way, and which creates a lot of urgency for companies to act.
What's the primary driver for urgency right now?
There are probably 3, maybe. We'll see as I go. I think the first is just like fear. I'm being yelled at by my boss or my boss's boss or
what's
my
our
board.
AI strategy?
What's our AI strategy?
Fascinating. Okay.
I'm on the hook.
Right.
And should I have to do something?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like thing one. Thing two is if I don't do something in this, my competitors will, and I will be rendered useless. So competitive threat and fear of disruption. And then the third is kind of much more innovation focused. There's actually a lot of upside that I am well positioned to capture because I'm an existing company with data and distribution through customers, whereby if I can figure out how to build the technology, I can win because I have the go-to-market side advantage.
In those bigger companies, is there a company that they're watching that they model themselves after and say like, oh, they got it right, we should do the same? Meaning like, ServiceNow sent a big shockwave through a bunch of different industries when, what was that, 2 earnings ago?
ServiceNow is a fascinating example because it's overnight, oh my gosh, we got this explosion. Well, guess what? They acquired Element AI for over $200 million. Right? So people are, I think there's a lot of fallacy that you can get to that level of impact without that level of investment, and that is not true.
Okay.
Right? You can't, the only reason they've been able to get to, I can't remember what the number was, but
yeah, I mean, it was hundreds of millions
of millions in savings.
Yep, that's right.
Is because they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on the best talent. They bought a research lab.
So do you think that's like the peanut butter and chocolate of this industry? Like old established, they have the distribution, they may not have the technology, they're going to start buying or partnering to bring that technology in-house?
That's it.
Okay.
And so, I mean, our bet is that there are going to be winners who come from the incumbent class and can successfully innovate. And that is like a counter narrative to what we've seen, which is startups always win, startups always disrupt, companies can't innovate fast enough. And I think the data advantages and the distribution advantages are significant. And so but there's a window in time. And so it does require that companies do the thing that they're historically bad at, which is make decisions to actually spend real money, so like focused investment, and the other is move. Like they have to move quickly, because without that, startups and other players will catch up.
Okay, so let's grade some of the existing players then. Because there's a lot of moves that are going on right now. You have like, on one end, you have that massive acqui-hire from Microsoft.
I think that was so smart.
Okay, why? Watching the market, especially our little corner of the startup world, process that over like 48 hours was wild.
Why do you say that?
Just because, I think there were a number of ways people interpreted it. One was like, ooh, huge loss, must have been a ton of drama in that company. They were looking for a soft landing, like, ouch. One was, actually, this was totally brilliant by Microsoft. The FTC would have never allowed them to buy this company. So like we've got this whole new quasi-acquisition path to liquidity that we've kind of never seen before. And it's largely...
Although it wasn't liquidity for investors, right? Because the company
that's why I said it was 48 hours, because then, like 24, 36 hours in, the information writes their piece. It's like, here's this kind of funky structure. All the talent went this way, but like the shell of a company has a license to
and
this.
we still have a bet that could work.
We still have equity here, but we got cash through. So it was like, it was a structure that nobody really even anticipated or seen. And so we were applying narratives to it that we were comfortable with, of like, oh, that company blew up, soft landing. But then suddenly there was like this so much more nuance in like what was happening there, the move that it was making. But Microsoft in their approach to it was like, it seems to be incredibly aggressive, incredibly leaned in, trying to kind of partner with the absolute leaders at the front of it. But I would imagine you'd see the whole spectrum, because the stakes are really high for the incumbents, right? And my sense, given your experience and who you partner with, that you have a pretty good lens into like what that tier of cloud providers, existing kind of software platform incumbents. So let's walk me through them. So Microsoft you thought was brilliant.
So Microsoft I thought was brilliant. They got a top tier AI leadership team that they I don't think they would have been able to buy otherwise. And I think that they probably made an offer that couldn't be refused. Now, that comes down to incentives between investors and founders. That's a totally different question. But for the AI market and for Microsoft's advantage, massive power play. You also spoke to level of aggressiveness that some of these players are taking. I'm hearing that Satya is showing up to customer meetings.
That's amazing.
So, like, talk about respect.
He's all the way in.
Like, we cannot lose. Market share is what matters. We will do whatever it takes. Our CEO will show up to make customers choose us over any other player and lock in not just our cloud advantage, but our model advantage. Brilliant. On the other hand, you have someone like Amazon, viewed as a laggard in the market. They've taken this very seriously. They've never been a laggard before on anything. It does not feel good, and they are doing everything they can to reorient. So tons of the go-to-market, product, everything teams are being reallocated to AI. I'm hearing massive shifts in the way the company is being structured, and they just brought on an incredible AI board member. So, like, big power plays happening all over. And then talk about Google. They've had the AI angle advantage from day one. I think they were actually too early on it and kind of gave up on it because it wasn't resonating at that moment in time.
Early in what sense? When did they come to
GCP, their value prop from the beginning was AI and machine learning, data differentiation.
Baked into your cloud platform.
Baked into your cloud.
Okay.
And then it kind of just wasn't really like catching on. People didn't care enough. And fast forward to today, like, now they're playing catch up to tell that story, whereas, like, actually they had that built in from day one.
It seemed like their big reveal kind of backfired on them.
Maybe. I mean, yes, pieces.
Yeah.
I think what's brilliant in what they've done is this, like, model garden, which is that, you know, a lot of, if you go with AWS, you have choices of Anthropic and Cohere and Hugging Face, right? If you go with Azure, you have, you know, OpenAI Azure, right? The Google piece, their strategy has been you can access and use lots of different models that are not our models on our system. So you can use open source models, you can access them through this model garden, you can access OpenAI, you can access Anthropic, whatever it is. And I think that's a really savvy move because then you are pitching performance and differentiation. You're taking a hit probably on, like, people using their models, Gemini, but you're banking that, you know, you're gonna be able to give them an edge through cloud. So I actually think they're playing a really interesting game. I think their story publicly hasn't been told as thoughtfully yet or as aggressively. And so I actually think they've made some really interesting moves, and I don't think the market yet knows what those are.
Okay, so who haven't we talked about in that, like, four horsemen or whatever?
Probably. So that's on the cloud side. Then you have OpenAI, Anthropic, and probably open source.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
Or it's kind of how I think about the race right now. That's not true, Mistral as well.
Sure.
But so there are others. Let's just call it OpenAI's the behemoth. OpenAI, I think their most interesting move is that not only do they have the API, that's cool, but companies are slow to adopt and to roll out products. Hey, we also are building a platform. That platform is self-serve. It allows you to, you know, spin up agents to get the power of AI at a really low cost and low effort. I think that's genius.
Okay.
And then the other thing that they've done is, hey, you want to turn on AI at your company? Cool, we have a product for that. It's called GPT Enterprise. And then, hey, that was so successful. At some point, all the salespeople got redeployed to GPT Enterprise because it was selling like hotcakes.
Yeah.
And now they have GPT teams. Cool, under 150 people, 10-person team. You too can have this. And it's the same as ChatGPT, except it's secure. And you can load in your company data and start querying with just natural language and getting value out of AI. And I think they recognize where the market is. And both of those products are alternates to advanced mode, hard mode, which is the API. And I think that most of the other model providers are still playing in API.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And so I think
they're
the
doing a
fact
great
that
job
they're
packaging it up, marketing it.
I think they are the closest to customer needs, and I think that they have been able to translate customer needs into product innovation. And
is it product innovation, or it sounds like it's like merchandising and packaging?
both,
Okay.
both.
Yeah.
But I mean, it really is product innovation because they took a product that was public and they made an enterprise-grade product. They fully built the platform that sits on top of their models that allows you to build these agents, these GPTs. And it's a much easier pill for some companies to swallow. And so I think there's basically OpenAI that's doing much more of a platform play, and then there's everyone else. So call it Cohere, Anthropic, et cetera, that are building. I mean, Anthropic right now is the leading model on performance, on cost, on quality, and in my opinion, until GPT-5 comes out, which is imminent. And so my view is that this is what's going to happen. Like, it's constantly shifting landscape and evolving rapidly, and it's not the case where there's going to be one winner.
Yeah.
There will be new releases constantly. There's a lot of competition, which creates pressure to innovate and to release new versions of models that are better and better. And this will continue the cycle. And companies will have to get good at adapting their solution to the best model on the market at any moment in time. And my hope or my belief is that we'll eventually have models that are good for specific types of tasks. And so you could actually be like swapping in and out different models for different things to get the best results. But that requires a whole lot of expertise, which is not where the market is today.
You're absolutely killing me, because I'm like, there's a million different directions we're going to go, and I would like to go, but like I still feel like we haven't. I think we should like level set on Tribe, just because I think that context is going to inform like a lot of the perspective you've got, and especially the experience you have in market with it. So as you've watched these kind of shifting sands, like this is a whole new development from day one with Tribe to like the current environment you're sitting in right now. Most of these platforms didn't exist. Most of this opportunity didn't exist. Most of these customers you're now talking about, or these use cases, weren't even in consideration.
Yep.
So like, what's the evolution of Tribe from 2019? Pull it forward to today, and just say like, how's the business changed then? And like, you've really clearly articulated kind of the playing field, which sounds crazy to try to navigate as a startup. As a startup or as
anybody, a big company.
Truly.
I mean, but startups, I think, actually is probably the hardest, because there are so many people who could eat your lunch.
Right, because you had touched on earlier in the past, like you never consider the incumbent as like a meaningful threat, and here we are.
Yeah.
Right? And so
I launched a startup at Google. I would always bet against, startups within big companies, but today it's working.
Yeah.
The evolution. So we, in 2019 till call it ChatGPT release, right? There's sort of like pre and post.
Is that one of those? When you were given you're in that world, is that like your JFK assassination?
100%.
Like, and you just absolutely remember where you were.
100%.
Okay.
You remember where you were, but you also know what the growth chart looks like of your business since.
Wow.
And it's it's a true inflection point for us.
Okay.
And so where we found ourselves is we had done 100+ data and machine learning deployments in companies from startups through to mid-market and even enterprise companies.
And you did this as kind of a talent marketplace, no?
We did. So we kind of had two offerings. The most important is that we had built up this network of hundreds of vetted, excellent ex-Google, ex-OpenAI level talent. So really, really top AI and data focused engineers and product builders. And we deployed them in two ways. Either companies could say, hey, we need talent, help us get an engineer who knows NLP, natural language processing, or computer vision, or whatever it is to solve this problem. Cool. Here's a few people who could be great fits, and you could hire them on a fractional basis through us. So you would still contract with Tribe, but you were getting talent for your particular needs, and we could swap people out based on what you needed over time and help you accelerate and grow your team that way. And then the sort of second way was that some companies weren't ready to just manage the talent on their own. They really needed experts who could run projects and manage the teams for them to get outcomes. And that was largely bigger companies. And in that case, we still took our talent from our fractional talent network and created these teams, and then we managed them for the customers and in close partnership with them. That looked much more just like traditional consulting services, everything from strategy through to hands-on keyboard development of data and ML-enabled products. What we realized in a post-GPT world, ChatGPT world, is that companies overnight were desperate to do things with AI, and they had no idea how. And so the problem wasn't talent. Talent was actually secondary. It was a bit of like a fallacy because the talent, there are engineers who are brilliant and they're experts in these models, but they're not experts in talking to business executives or simplifying technology, making it something they can understand. And so that was actually the biggest problem that we had to solve. And that meant much more of a managed solution, much more of a hand-holding kind of experience where we actually helped. We knew what the goal was. The goal was to get companies using AI in ways that mattered for their business. And what we ended up doing is realizing that actually we had built up the best talent in the industry, the highest concentration of the smartest minds in data and AI, and that instead of farming them out to companies, we would just use them for ourselves to go build products for mostly mid-market and enterprise companies. And that was because startups really want to and are incentivized to hire their own teams. And they should. That's great. Particularly today, if you're a startup and you don't have AI talent on your team and AI is a big part of your value prop, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So that kind of was an obvious less of a good fit for us and allowed us to really focus on what were the barriers to adoption for mid-market and enterprise companies. And the barriers are education, so still that art of the possible, except applied in a different way because they had now seen the power of ChatGPT. Instead of us pushing, we were now being pulled.
And I would imagine those conversations were like wildly different.
They were wildly different. We were no longer convincing companies that they should care. They deeply cared. So
they're pulling you.
They were pulling us. I can do AI, but I can't do push versus pull. Right. They were pulling us and desperately, but there was still a lot of kicking the tires, right? How can you actually cut through the noise and the hype that something like ChatGPT created? Because there's a lot of interest, but not all of that interest is ready. And so we sort of did a few things. One is figure out really quickly how we could segment between those customers to actually focus our time and effort. Of what we still believed is that education and getting people who weren't quite ready to be ready was actually really important. And so spent a lot of time running workshops with executive teams, helping them understand the art of the possible, walking them through case studies that might be relevant for their business, bringing in engineers and doing hands-on ideation sessions to help them get to use cases, evaluate the business impact and the technical feasibility given the state of their data. And then the intent was to come out of that with one idea that or a multitude of ideas that we wanted to go build POCs against. POCs are the smallest proof of concepts, the smallest version of a test you can run that still shows you if there's going to be value for your business. And that's basically the kind of journey we've been taking companies on. It's never been easier to run a POC. And you know, if you're hearing McKinsey or whoever quote $1 million+ for POCs, like, you know, you're not doing the right thing, because we are all kind of standing on the shoulders of giants with the LLM models that are out there, and building on top of those models at a POC scale should not be hard. That should not be the barrier.
Or that expensive, it sounds like.
Totally.
Okay.
And same thing with, you know, learning about this stuff. The goal for all of us, for the cloud players, for the model providers, for the companies themselves, and for Tribe, is deeply aligned. It's to get to use cases that matter for the business, that are possible technically, and that ultimately get into production so that they can grow a business, whether that is through increased revenue, increased retention of customers, or by cutting costs. But all kind of that, to where we are today, is a lot of experimentation and still very limited use cases in production, which is why the examples like ServiceNow are so compelling. It's partially because the dollars are so big, and partially because there are so few examples of real applications that are moving the needle for businesses in quantitative ways.
In production too.
Because they're not in production.
That's right.
So if it's not in production, you don't have data.
Feels to me like there's two things to kind of pull on there. One would be, you know, one of the knocks against AI right now is like this. There's very easy money right now in these like POC. Experimental budget, let's see what's going on there. So maybe there's something to talk about there. The other piece of that is, you know, that you mentioned was, you know, they're looking to solve a problem today, but these models are moving at like insane velocity. So it's like the solution you come up with, the pricing you come up with, the architecture approach you come up with, the even the art of the possible that's today, I would imagine like a few months from now is going to be wildly different.
That's right. And I think that this is where we get really excited about the future of Tribe, and also the opportunity to help companies navigate the rapidly evolving ecosystem and landscape. And that's that it's not like building software. It's not a develop and then kind of anyone can manage this thing. You're really talking about building something new all the time. And it's because the infrastructure on which we are all building is not static. It's not fully developed. It exists and will continue to iterate. And that is truly a certainty. And so I think there's a mindset shift that still has to happen, that is, AI will be not just a one-time only investment, but something that I invest in kind of over the perpetuity of the company, in the same way that I invest in cloud. And in order for that to be true,
this is an ongoing expense. It's an ongoing investment. This is not some static thing that I just collect my bill on once a month, pay it, get the mileage points for it. No?
And nothing that is as good as the promise of AI could ever be true, you know, without a cost. But what needs to be true is that the value outweighs the cost. And I think that that's also where people are struggling. And partially they're struggling because the models are still quite expensive, but the cost will come down. And there's just a lot of pressure on the model providers from competition, both against the incumbents, but also from open source. And so both companies have a lot of options, but things will get better. And so in the spirit of skating where the puck is going, building now, you know, is you need to build for today's systems, but also build in a way that's modular, such that you can be adapting your solution based on the best-in-class technology of the moment. And that best-in-class technology of the moment will change so rapidly that unless you do have the right architecture in place, you're kind of going to build things that are going to become useless and obsolete really quickly. And so at Tribe, we think about not just building, we have our own architecture tooling that allows us to spin up these POCs really quickly with a fraction of the dev time. We have tooling that allows us to help customers compare models, compare cost, quality, latency, et cetera.
Oh, that's interesting. So they can actually see in real time, like, if we're running it on this model, this is what the cost structure looks like, this is what the performance looks like.
And this is when it's before production,
Sure.
so they're estimates,
Yeah.
but based on actual model performance for their use case. So it's not theoretical, it's specific to what they want to do, and then at least we're able to give them the information to make the right model selection based on that moment in time technology options. And then the last piece is, okay, well, how do you get that thing into production? That takes a whole other stream of work. We've built a lot of tooling to really do some of those integrations in a scalable and repeatable way. But then the bigger issue for companies, which I think so few are thinking about yet because we're not at production for most companies, is how do you future-proof these models? We've made this investment. How do I ensure this thing isn't going to be obsolete? And if I'm turning it over to my team of engineers who don't have AI experience, they're not going to be able to continue to innovate on the model in the way that it needs to. And so in many cases, we're helping build these applications and fine-tune these models for particular company use cases, but then also maintaining them for companies and helping manage that model iteration for them on an ongoing basis.
It's so interesting to me to hear, even in this quick conversation, the evolution of Tribe from marketplace, essentially,
full
to
marketplace.
Services business, to this kind of software and a service hybrid. It's fascinating to me that two Silicon Valley people and Silicon Valley in general has such an allergic reaction to the idea of services. Like,
deeply.
A, is that warranted, and B, what's different about the current environment we're in right now that makes that kind of software and a service business a lot more appealing in terms of either as an approach or for you as founders, you as your team, like you want to create enterprise value for this business, right? And so how do you think about this new approach or this kind of evolving approach?
Yeah, let's start with why services has a bad rap in tech and in VC. I think it's warranted. It's a people-heavy business that's largely built on brand, right? Think McKinsey, right? Just by saying McKinsey, you can spend $1 million on a deck, right? Or millions. And it scales linearly with people and headcount. It does not scale like software does, which is exponentially. And so that's all valid on top of the fact that revenues tend to be really lumpy and chunky. We've seen that in our business. It's not wrong. I think first of all, I felt like I saw a need. And I felt like initially there was a customer problem that I believed was the future. I believed every company would need to become an AI company. It turns out I was a little early on it, but it was true. Today, every company wants to become an AI company, right? They are pulling me.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, I finally got it.
You got it.
And so I think that is true. I think what felt really different was now we had gone from, okay, there was a problem and I had an innovative solution to that problem, which was a fractional network of talent that meant that my fixed costs were really low. So I took the services model, but I changed the cost equation. And so all of a sudden it was something that I could manage with zero funding. So we bootstrapped the company, ran it to millions of dollars with zero funding, just like pure brute force and our time and no salaries.
We're going to come back to that.
Great. And then the sort of next iteration was, okay, we've been doing services, like we had the marketplace, but we also were doing some managed services because we were pulled into that by larger customer needs. There was a change. There was a fundamental shift. The AI JFK moment, which was ChatGPT, all of a sudden the explosion of demand was palpable. That allowed for two things. One is like just unprecedented demand, and not just demand for products, but actually like to even know how to use the product. So for services, it felt like a unique pull moment for services in AI and with limited solutions that existed. So pure white space where we actually had the experience to fill that white space. And then the second piece is that one of the challenges with building tech from a services model is that you're pulled in a million directions by customers.
Yep.
What ChatGPT afforded is concentration of demand, not just in terms of volume, but actually in terms of use cases. So all of a sudden, instead of having 800 different problems we were working on, we kind of had 10. And that's like a dream.
No doubt.
Because now you can start building tooling to make those 10 use cases more repeatable. And because the market was so new, there's the underlying models, but the application layer doesn't exist yet. And so we were just in this really unique moment where we could be churning out these POCs for generative AI applications. Of those POCs, everyone thinks they're a unique snowflake, but a lot of the use cases are quite similar. And there is really concentration in sort of a set of types of problems that are having value for businesses. And so that allowed us to then use every single project we did to build reusable components that would make the next project we did faster and get to better results for customers, but get them, most importantly, to those wow moments as quickly as we possibly could, which kept them continuing to want to invest in AI. So I think that is, we've been really led by the market instead of led by sort of our hypotheses around what are or are not good businesses. I feel like we've been in the space for a long time. We knew what the problems were customers were having, and I didn't care if it was a less sexy idea to investors because I believed so deeply there was a there. There was a gap in the market that we were well positioned to solve.
These 10 kind of obviously the benefit of niching down is that you now have like a bunch of reusability, you have a bunch of like case studies, you have improved margin because you're not reinventing the wheel every time. For you, what have been the most interesting, eye-opening use cases so far that you all have worked on where you've seen kind of an immediate lift or benefit to, or kind of an entirely new, potentially product business for any of the people you've worked with?
Yeah, I mean, that's where I get really excited. I think the conversation around AI is a lot. I was at one of my kids' field trips the other day, and I told someone what I did, and they were like, "Oh, you're just going to take all of our jobs, aren't you?" Right? That's
so
like
with that
that's
attitude.
maybe. Tell me what you do. Maybe we can do that better. But no, I think that's all focused on cost efficiency. That's all focused on replacing humans or automating workflows. That is happening with and without Tribe.
Yeah.
That is being baked into.
What percentage of your opportunities would you say are like straight automation cost savings?
Maybe 50%.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's still
so
real.
Still a leading use case, yeah.
But I will tell everyone watching as well, we tell all of our customers that we believe it will be commoditized.
Yeah.
So if they have a unique workflow that requires nuance such that they should be building something custom, then great, we will build you something custom. But we will also tell you if you could just be buying a product off the shelf, or if you could be using a tool within a product you already pay for.
Fascinating.
So
you're pointing them back to existing vendors or to other startups to say
and that's just
investing in this right now.
We believe in being people's kind of Sherpa on this AI journey, and building them something that is there's a lot of reasons why an AI solution you build could become obsolete, but doing it when we know what's on the roadmap of companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and others feels really silly. So this is one of the benefits of partnering with them. We kind of know where these platforms are moving, and we can be a real advisor to our customers and helping them figure out where they should be making big bets in AI and where they should still absolutely be moving on AI, but they should be doing it in more cost-effective ways or with just fewer technological solutions.
So what's the hallmark of a big bet? What do you see where you say, okay, you got to go big here?
There are probably a few ways to answer that, but I can give you a few examples. For me, it's all focused on innovating on the customer experience with AI. So can you improve the customer experience, the way they engage with you, such that it creates a new level of value for customers? So there are a few examples of this. One example is an app like MyFitnessPal. Nutrition tracking, you have to log everything you eat. I drank this iced tea, I have to sit here typing it in, then I have to find the right type of iced tea. Is it a large, is it a small? What we've built is the ability to do, voice to text. So I just speak, I say, hey, I had an iced tea, it was a large. It automates the connection to the data catalog of food items, and that food is automatically entered and categorized for me.
Which as a user, I've been on and off, it's a magical moment for sure.
And makes me much more likely to log my food. Well, if I'm more likely to log my food, I'm much more likely to get value from the app. I'm much more likely to stick with my diet. I'm more likely to stick around as a paying customer. So there's real customer value, and that translates to company value. Another example would be a company that sells online textbooks. Well, they realized that one of the barriers to students buying new textbooks was that teachers were really busy and they were never changing the syllabus. So from year to year, the textbooks,
no changes, no new textbooks, no
were
less
the same.
Sales. Right.
You could sort of share them. They had high concentration in the same types of book sales. And so we built an AI generating syllabus creating tool for, I just used way too many words, but
Creatoring, we're gonna have to look that one up.
Auto-generated syllabus
Hey Siri, is
tool.
creatoring a tool?
It is not. Tool for teachers. And now it's meaningfully easier to create a new syllabus. This makes teachers' lives better. It keeps the curriculum fresh for students and for the business. They're gonna get a significant revenue uptick in increased sales. So how can you think about adding value back to your customer? Another example is a software solution that services mechanics in garages. We built a tool that makes it so the mechanics can see more customers during the course of their day. Well, guess what? That product, that company, is now going to use this as an upsell feature that they can turn on because it's sufficiently valuable that they can now charge more for it. So yes, the costs of compute are high, yes, the model costs are high, but if you can create enough value, you can actually pass on some of those costs and reap most of the rewards on the value, plus not to mention, market share, concentration, and being a market leader.
What's interesting to me in those use cases is they're all incredibly niche. Like auto mechanic software, so, like textbook renting software. Like we're not talking about like, what's interesting to me about that is that these conversations are happening at that tier of company right now. And so many of them are trying to kind of get ahead of the curve here and unlock either innovation against competitors or unlock it sounds like even new revenue opportunities for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think we are seeing, and these are the companies that we get the most excited about working with, we are seeing companies that are saying, we believe the future of our business is AI. And it's not AI like, hand wavy AI. It's like it's got to do something. But we believe if we don't move, we will be completely disrupted. And they're moving, they're making big bets, and we are proving to them that there's value to be had, that they can start thinking about the go-to-market implications so that they can make the cost equation work, and that they can then continue to invest in really releasing these products to the market.
What's interesting to me about the way you're moving and the way they are moving feels a bit different than maybe software has been adopted in the past, and that is you have a very different kind of go-to-market motion than historically enterprise software business that they build a sales team, they go out, it's very expensive, they hit the road, they hit the phones. What have you found working in terms of distribution for education for, and ultimately like closing, getting in front of these customers? How are you doing it?
One of the big benefits of being bootstrapped and profitable is that I love $0 CAC. I
Put that on a t-shirt.
really love low customer acquisition costs and scalable channels.
Yeah.
So this is one of the big things that I believe changed in a post-ChatGPT world, which is that everyone wants the same things. And so we have aligned ourselves to be a core node in this ecosystem and a friendly, collaborative player with everyone.
I mean, when you say everyone, spec out,
Yep.
like
we are model, so there's basically the cloud providers. We are cloud agnostic. We partner with all of the cloud players. We are model agnostic, and we partner with all of the model providers. Now, the cloud partners have aligned themselves with some of the model providers. And so where we're doing work with those cloud providers, we are entrenching ourselves in the ecosystem of those model providers for those projects. And so I'll give you an example, which is to say that let's think about the incentives in the industry. The incentives are that for the cloud players, you are using their cloud to build your AI solutions. If you build your AI solutions on AWS, you will spend more on compute, and you are locked into their ecosystem. That is great. They love that. So it is in their benefit to have the best models on their platform. So they offer Bedrock. They also offer Claude and Anthropic. They also offer Cohere. They also offer Hugging Face. There's a variety of things you can get through their ecosystem. That's true across the board. And so what do they care about? They care about not just you're building a use case, they care about that use case going into production. The only way you spend on the API is if you are in production, and the only way you spend on cloud is if you are in production. So all that matters is getting to a use case that a company values enough that they believe it will have impact on their business and are willing to do the development effort to get it in production and to continue to invest in the future proofing of that model. If we do that, they will reap the rewards of that model, so they will win. We've sort of seen I just gave you some examples of how Tribe will win because we will be partnered with them to build and create that impact, but also we are, through that work of getting them through the adoption curve into production, we are delivering tremendous value to AWS or to any cloud partner, just as we are to the model provider that we are using, because they need people activated and adopted on their systems, but don't necessarily have the means to be hand-holding or working on the development of applications for every company. So everything Tribe does is to get models and products that matter to companies at real business value into production. And if we do that, we've aligned incentives with every player in the market such that AWS, in that example, is then sending us all of the customers that come to them that are their highest value customers because they know that we can get them into production and we can get them value. Same thing with the model providers. And so coming back to customer acquisition, we've built a really partnerships-heavy strategy where we really are this core node in the ecosystem.
I was going to say, that's not theoretical. They're literally bringing you their best customers.
Literally bringing us their best customers, and where we are actively partnering to get these models through this life cycle and get companies to become AI enabled. So it's not $0 CAC, to be clear.
Well, so that's one, platforms, one tentpole, model providers, another tentpole. There's this kind of other new developing tentpole specifically for Tribe and for AI applications in general that's been super interesting, at least for me to watch develop, this kind of private equity go-to-market motion. How did that evolve?
Like luck and geography have a lot to do with your framing, which is funny. When I lived in San Francisco, where I lived for 10 years, your world is tech. When you come to New York, your world is finance. right? It's changing
Totally.
rapidly.
Yeah.
But let's be clear, there are more bankers and private equity people and lawyers than there are anything else here. When we started the company in San Francisco, pretty shortly thereafter, I moved to New York. I think a combination of factors led me to private equity. The first was the fact that I was in New York and there was a whole lot of it around. It was hard to ignore. The second is that I actually came from the growth equity side of the world. And so I knew how to talk the language of value creation for portfolio companies, which are, ultimately what many of these teams are trying to do: invest in great companies and then use their resources to ensure that they are getting a financial return from these companies, and making the most of their investment. And so I think the first, I moved to New York and I met a ton of investors when I moved here. One of them told me that one of the smartest people in data science was this guy, Drew Conway, who worked at 2 Sigma. And he was leading all of data science for 2 Sigma private investments. So not the hedge fund side of the business, but private equity and the venture arms. Met with him, he got the idea really instantly, became a customer, and then from there we had so many use cases to go out and sort of pitch to the private equity landscape, and the business really evolved from there. And what's interesting about private equity is that just like cloud, it's a channel. You sell into one firm and you have access to sometimes hundreds of companies. And today, just like companies need a strategy, private equity firms know that they need an AI strategy for adoption of AI and acceleration of AI across their portfolio. And so Tribe can be that solution. We can help them both educate their entire portfolio, but also run those workshops to get them to the core use cases that will actually matter for their business. And then they can have a differentiated level of board conversations with them around where they should and should not be investing, such that we can then have a really tight partnership with not just the companies in their portfolio, but also with the investors and the board members, so that we're building the things that they're underwriting from a financial perspective. And so you sell into one company and you get to hundreds. That's also a really good equation.
Yes, it is. You mentioned you came from growth equity, from private equity, from San Francisco and startups, and yet you ran, it appears to me at least, you went in the complete opposite. You broke every taboo or every convention of all of those places that you came from. So you bootstrapped the business to millions in revenue. You have a service component to your business where most people
wouldn't. Heavily services, AI-enabled services.
AI-enabled services. Yeah. Was there ever the question early on of okay, let's not bother trying to raise money for this thing because we know VCs are going to hate it? Or was there we want to avoid, I've been inside of these things. I know how the math works. I'm now putting words in your mouth, but I'm saying, was there something where maybe you understood the model enough to want to avoid it?
I am not a venture hater.
I know you are. You have a venture fund. We're going to get into that too. We're going to get into that too.
So I'm just spoiler alerting here, which is that I think it was just different when it was my journey, when it was my sort of entrepreneurial focus. I think I thought about what experiences I had had with venture, and I was less indexed to the growth equity investing side of things because that's so different from early stage. Yeah. I think the 2 early stage experiences I had were pretty formative. One was starting a company within Google. We were very well funded. I joined when it was only engineers. About 30 engineers had been sitting in a room that had special keycard access in Mountain View that no one else could get into, working on a secret project. Mm-hmm. And they built in secret for a year and a half before a business person came over. I was one of the first business people. It was really shocking to me to go from sitting on a sales floor where everyone's chatting to a silent engineering floor where no one spoke. Mm-hmm. But it was an amazing experience. We had lots of funding. We had the ability to hire incredible engineers, and we scaled the team from that initial 30 or so to 150 people. We launched a product that was global. It was in 1 million currencies. You could pay in 100 ways. It was a marketplace product. We launched in 8 categories. Everything had to be so big because it was Google, and it didn't work.
No.
We totally failed. So I saw what you can do with a lot of resources, and in some cases you can win, and in other cases you can do things that are completely non-economic. So like building, with 30 engineers without talking to customers, probably not a good idea. But like you could only do that if you had tons of money.
Totally.
So similarly, when I left Capital G, I felt like I had, first of all, this warped startup experience, because a startup in a large company truly is an oxymoron.
Yep.
And so I didn't want to have a startup. I wanted to have a startup without quotes. And so I joined a Series A fintech company, wildly well-funded, top-tier investors.
Tens of millions of dollars.
Tens of millions of dollars. Awesome team. Team was about 30 people when I joined.
Okay.
The revenue was low. And that's because similarly, we spent a lot of the resources building tech, and the go-to-market side was lagging. I just kind of decided I really wanted to build a real business. And it's not that wasn't going to become a wildly successful business. It has.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud to have been part of it. But it wasn't how I wanted to build. It didn't make sense to me. And so I left. I started exploring ideas. I found something that I felt like was a real problem, and where I thought my skills were well suited to solve the problem. And it turned out that I felt I could do it with just me and my time and Noah's time. That we didn't actually need that much to get started. So it's not that I was anti-venture. It's that I believe that as an entrepreneur, you should look at these decisions critically and not just be doing things because that's what the market does, but really think about, for this business, what's the path that makes sense? And the reason people raised venture historically is because they needed to make large investments in human capital and experts and whatever, in engineers, to build products in order to sell them. In my case, I had an idea for something that required no dev. And I had an idea for a fractional work model that was really cheap. So if I could sell in a contract, I could pay the talent. So it really just was...
You also had a transaction right up front.
Right up front. It was a go-to-market driven business because I had go-to-market skills and that background, which allowed us to be profitable from day one. And in the first full year of business, we had made more in revenue than the startup with tens of millions of dollars and 30 people sitting in a fancy office in San Francisco.
Right.
And that's not the right way for everyone to build a business. That was the right way for me to build a business, and that made me feel super excited to go to work every day.
Was that a revelation once you got into the business, we can charge up front, or was that a challenge you kind of gave to yourself? Can we create a business that doesn't require kind of what a traditionally venture-backed company would have?
I don't know if I separated those questions.
Yeah.
I think I thought, hey, here's a problem that you have. Let's say, I remember one of our early conversations when we didn't get the deal was with Sephora. So, hey, Sephora, and truly this was just me calling someone up. Hey, can you connect me to this person at Sephora? Great, let's get on a call. Talk to us about what you're doing in data and machine learning. My best sales tactic, which I can share with the world right now, is just act like you're building from scratch, and then you can always ask for feedback from someone. It becomes totally disarming, and then by the end, you've convinced them that actually you can do something for them, and then they ask you if this is something you can do for them. So we started with, everything was, hey, we're exploring this idea. We'd love to talk to you and get your feedback. So then we could just do tons of data collection. What do you do about this? Where is data being applied in your business? Oh, wow, well, we have these experts that you're doing a lot of pricing optimization. We have some of the best pricing optimization people, and we did a project recently that did X, Y, Z. we hadn't done any projects, clearly, but the people in our network were these brilliant engineers who had done tons of consulting projects, and we were able to borrow their experience. And we knew that they could execute, so we felt confident in kind of selling ahead in that way. I think then in doing that, the idea was to get them to a contract where whether they paid up front or not, we would be on the hook, where they would be on the hook to pay us from day one.
Yeah.
So there was no freemium model, there was no free trial, none of that. They had to pay to play, and we needed them to pay in order to be able to play.
Right. Those constraints, the like capital constraints, they ended up creating a culture of like that valued the constraints. The culture at the Google startup and the culture at the 30-person, tens of millions of dollars, they were playing with other people's money. And so like that culture was a very different culture, I would imagine. Was there any kind of intangible benefits for being so revenue and fundamentals forward as a business that maybe is kind of carried on as you ramped it up?
Yeah, I think probably benefits and drawbacks.
Yeah.
So on the benefit side, we're really thoughtful about where we make bets. And guess what? So are our customers, right? Even though they're big companies, they're not making AI bets flippantly. And we are sort of coming to that from a place of empathy, which is that's what those decisions are like for us. I think on the kind of flip side, lots of companies can be running multiple experiments at a time. We can't always.
Yeah.
So we do have to, figure out, I think one of the biggest currencies a startup has is probably focus and then also volume of learnings such that you can refine your focus and perspective. And I think we're really lucky to have volume because we have high volume of projects at any moment in time, which means we're actually seeing AI applications in the field and using the models that are on the market today every day. So we have tons of reps that then we can be feeding back to our cloud partners, to our model providers, and to our customers to then get more customers. And that's like the feedback loop that's really important. So if projects are down, or not only is revenue down, but the thing I care about even more is your reps are down, your learnings are down, which is just going to limit your trajectory. And so we have to care about both because we don't have that much excess capital. We're living off of our balance sheet for the most part. Have to be really smart and thoughtful about how we grow, but also really making sure that we are seeing more than anyone else, faster than anyone else, so that we can feed that back into our go-to-market in the same way OpenAI is. Yeah. And we're not OpenAI.
So you recently made a decision, I'm looking directly into the camera now, you recently made a decision to add to your balance sheet.
That's right, I did.
What drove that? What was behind that?
I mean, it was this really tall guy.
You finagled us. You finagled us.
It was fully the market. I really believe what I said at the beginning. We've been driven by the market and the problem. And the market changed on us. Overnight, there was an opportunity we were so well set to capture. And yet, there's a window in time where that is true. And growing based on just purely your balance sheet and profit that you can sort of feed back into the business, because we're not taking any money out of the business, means that you're set on growth rate based on what you earn. And in this moment in time, that didn't feel like the right trade. We believe there's a massive company to be built here, and that Tribe can be that company, and we wanted more firepower to go after that opportunity.
And to be clear, I mean, with the resources you had, your foot was like fully on the pedal, even chasing the opportunity. I mean, to the point where like you weren't paying yourself.
Never.
Noah wasn't paying himself.
Never.
Like everything was going back into the business.
Every dollar was going back into the business. You brought it up earlier on like people playing with other people's money versus playing with our money. It shouldn't be different. And maybe it is, but it shouldn't be, which is that I never thought of it as my money to play with. I wasn't in this to build a cash flow business or a lifestyle business. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just wasn't. So my intent was never to take, the meager profit. I want the big prize, right? So everything was always going back
crumbs,
into
all
the
cake.
business.
Sorry to bring up flour again.
Yeah, it's okay. But really, like that was the game we were playing, and we could do it without stressing over that because we had so much conviction in what we were doing, and we still do. And so even though we have now excess padding and more money to play with, it's still that same set of decisions, which is what are the bets we want to make? We can't make every bet.
As you were working through that decision framework of what to do, how did Indie enter the picture? Had you heard of it before? Had you seen anything we put out? Okay.
I had heard of you all before. I was lucky to have a close friend and coworker in Ashley Mayer, who had been a scout for Indie. Yeah. So I had always heard her speak very highly of you and of Indie. And I think she kind of was always the nudge, like, hey, what you're doing could be really interesting to Indie. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, I just wasn't looking for capital, so it was never really on my radar. And then when we were, you were one of the first conversations we had. Mm-hmm. I just loved how flexible you were. One of the things I worried about is we had this window in time, and yet I was going to eat into that window by spending all my time fundraising and not building this business. Yeah. And I wasn't at a point where we had so many people on the team where I didn't have to go do the work myself. Right. Any time I was spending on fundraising was time I was not acting like Satya and spending with customers. Yeah. And that mattered to me a lot. When the stakes are high, I believed that I was looking for an amazing partner who was bought in on my vision, on the mm-hmm. company that I wanted to build, rather than wanting me to be something else, mm-hmm. who wasn't going to run a really lengthy, pain in the ass process.
How do we do on that
front? You did great. I mean, you said yes quickly. Then you made the process on the back end probably.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We had to do some. We actually have to do diligence on it.
Super reasonable. Right?
We got to a yes pretty quick.
You got to a yes very quick, and you were always so supportive, and I felt like you just kind of got it right away, and you were very comfortable with, if you're services and you think there's a massive company there, great. If you're software and there's a massive company there, great. If you're somewhere in the middle and you're part software, part AI, part services, that's great too.
If there's a massive business there, because I think we both aligned around that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think you said you weren't interested in building a lifestyle business, you weren't interested in building a cash flow business, and we weren't interested in being a part of a cash flow business.
Totally fair. Right. I mean, if I were building a cash flow business, I wouldn't have given up a lot of my equity to do it. That's because then you're taking out of your pocket.
That's right.
So the bet is that together we can grow the pie, mm-hmm. build a much bigger company than we'd be able to on our own, mm-hmm. And that even a smaller share for me is worth it because we're building something so much bigger. Ultimately, I care about building a product that solves a real problem that customers want. That is that pull motion. Mm-hmm. And if you do that and can add value to the ecosystem, I believe we will be able to have a scalable path to a massive company.
You're no newbie to the startup world. You had lots of other options. So what was there anything specific to Indie, our messaging, our model, the people beyond their height, that felt like a better fit for what we were trying to build with Tribe versus you could have easily gone and raised a $5 to $10 million. You could have skipped any kind of interim round. You could have gone straight to Series A. You could have raised a $10 to $20 million round. Why not do that?
I think that if you're going to build...
This is the Indie infomercial part.
I love it. If you're going to go raise, $10+ million, you have to be venture, you have to be a fish. They want fish, you have to be a fish. Mm. I wasn't sure if we were a fish. Mm. I don't mean fish in terms of big outcome. I knew that's what we wanted. There's not a question there. But we've already talked about the fact that venture has a stigma around services.
Yep.
And so I sort of take the same approach with customers. Why should I spend my time trying to convince someone? Why should I spend my time trying to convince people or companies to build AI products when there is like a massive market of people who already want to build and are desperate to build AI products?
Yeah.
And so, you could spend a lot of time trying to shape your company to suit what investors want. And I remember sitting with you at a coffee shop or a breakfast spot where you had 100 Diet Cokes. I said to you, I know what they want me to say, and I won't say it. And
what did they want you to say? What weren't you willing to say?
They wanted me to say I was going to become a software company.
Yeah.
And I saw in that moment a massive opportunity in services. My intent was not ever to build a company that grew linearly when it could grow exponentially, but I believed that in that moment in time, services was a massive opportunity and could be a wedge to building software. And I still very much believe that. That was a vision that there were a bunch of people who were excited about, but there were also a lot of people who were less excited about that. And so I really, having been in the VC world, I know that alignment with your investor is so important. And I never wanted to be misaligned in terms of what the incentives were or feel like I was being pushed into building a different business than what I wanted to build or the opportunity that I saw in the market. Because ultimately, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you're on the ground building, you're seeing things that are different from what an investor is seeing. There's a lot of benefits to what you can learn from investors, but also you have some gut feel to where there's opportunity. And I felt like I was going to miss the opportunity I was seeing if I was getting pulled in a different direction because of kind of more traditional VC perspectives. And actually, that was probably my biggest fear going into the fundraise, was that I was going to be pushed and pulled into different things than what I wanted or saw. And I actually even felt that in the process. I'm like such a natural salesperson, so you want to tell people what they want to hear.
She really is a very, very good. I mean, come on. Look at her on this camera. Like this is like pitch perfect through the whole thing. Yes.
But I think you're trying to fit the box, like
totally. And but the thing is, you knew what it took to fit in the box. Yeah.
And I would feel myself saying things, that were ahead of where we were just to like meet what they wanted, and then I'd feel gross after, and just no one was going to win in that situation. So I really felt like I was looking for something very specific. I was looking for someone who got what we were trying to do, who believed there was another way to build a massive company, and who was ready and excited to bet on that future. And like that really aligned with the indie thesis of, I think really the way I interpret it is entrepreneur first. And really entrepreneurial vision led, and also a bunch of flexibility in terms of how a round is constructed, which we didn't really even take you up on.
I was going to ask, what in that flexibility was, because ultimately we just did a very traditional round.
We did a very vanilla round, and again, that was more for speed and simplicity. So at that point, I saw the opportunity. I didn't want to spend our time structuring some deal. It was this was all about acceleration and speed for me. And so how can we do something that works for you, works for us, and gets us off to the races? Because at that point, we had closed in 1 month since meeting the companies, 26 enterprise deals, and we needed more bodies to go service those customers, and I needed them yesterday.
Yeah.
And so all that mattered was getting the cash in the bank so I could hire a few people immediately. And fast forward to today, we have an amazing revenue team in place that is all over these accounts and bringing us into more. But that was possible because of our partnership and being able to move on that opportunity really quickly.
Obviously, there's a learning curve and an onboarding that goes along with that. But I mean, if I look at Q1, it feels like you're doing almost a quarter what even last year you were doing all year. Like it feels like it's accelerating in a very different way.
Absolutely, and that's the goal.
Yeah.
And at the same time, building a company, adding new people. We know that not every new ad translates to revenue. It really takes time, and we have significantly grown on a percentage basis the team. That's challenging for an organization to absorb. Yeah. And so we are still catching up with ourselves and ramping everyone. But again, we're making bets and investments in long-term growth so that the quarter-to-quarter fluctuations actually should matter a lot less because we don't have to be as reliant on the bottom line. But you do have to believe that those payoffs are coming down the line.
Any buyer's remorse?
Oh, I have no buyer's remorse. I get lots of friendly visits to New York.
That's true.
I haven't been invited on a ski trip yet.
It's coming.
We have a pair of matching sneakers.
It's true.
I think the best is yet to come.
The downside of being a well-funded company is I have this money hose. So every time a little fire comes up, anytime a problem comes, I just spray the money hose on it and it takes care of it.
Money hides problems. It does not solve problems. So if you have a broken funnel and you go spend a whole lot of money to run ads, well, cool, you solved your top of funnel problem. And you're probably growing on a percentage basis, so you have a chart that goes up and up, but the unit economics of it don't actually work. And that's we've basically defined majority of venture-backed companies over the last cycle.
And you feel like you avoided that because you were so close to the bare metal? Wasn't an option?
It's still not an option. Yeah. I'm not running ads for Tribe.
No.
Actually, I am right now, but it is. Wait, we can't say this. We can't say this, but it's an ad that someone gave me for free. Okay. But no, I mean, I think that's the thing that I have a hard. It's so intangible to so many entrepreneurs because money is tangible. Yeah.
What's intangible is the ingenuity that comes from that constraint you had, I believe, and I think you probably believe that too, is ultimately going to lead to a much better outcome because now you've baked that into how you now ultimately get to scale the company. Versus I think when you have resources, you probably don't get as creative as that. I don't think you find these go-to-market channels, these low-cost channels, these non-leaky channels by just throwing money at it.
Yeah. And I think also there probably are moments where something's working and you have to put fuel on the fire.
Right.
And so I think it's a balance.
Yeah.
Venture does serve a real purpose. It serves a purpose of scale. And I think the challenge is that early stage companies are raising monster rounds at monster valuations and they're not at a point where they're ready to scale. So if they spend it, they're probably spending it poorly. Or if they sit on a war chest, they're in a pretty good spot right now because they have a lot of runway to go figure things out until they're in a place where they can scale, and then they have the capital to go scale the machine. But building the machine is really hard and it takes a long time, and I am reminded and humbled by that every day. So we are in a lucky place, which is right place, right time, with the resources and knowledge and expertise to deliver on this problem. And there are still 1,000 things that could kill us every day, right?
Is there an inflection point in the future where you say, okay, now I am going to go raise that 50 million plus round because the opportunity is just too obvious. The scale is just too, if we don't do it, somebody else is going to do it, so it might as well be us.
Just depends. I believe capital has to be your blocker. And so I just look at everything really critically. Is the reason we're not growing faster because we don't have more money. Like, is that true? In most cases, it isn't. Why aren't you growing faster? Well, it's the market, it's that our product isn't yet meeting customer needs, our value prop isn't resonating. There are 1,000 things that could be going on. Right now, is our target ICP well enough defined? Are we going after the right customers? Are we getting the right feedback? Or are we over-indexing on feedback from a customer that actually isn't the customer we want? That is not a money problem. Those are not money problems. Money problems are, we are drowning. We have so much business, we can't handle it. It is, Noah's Ark over here, and we need a lifeboat. And we need to go, build an army of people to handle the deluge. That's a money problem. Build it to get to that point. So I remain incredibly open, as I have been in this process. We started the company, we ran it for years, fully bootstrapped, profitable, pouring all proceeds back into the business. And we changed our tune and raised some capital because it was the right decision for the business. And the same is true go forward. We want to build a huge company, that's the North Star, a category-defining AI company. And in order to do that, if we need more capital, great, then we'll welcome those conversations. And if we don't, because we're swimming in money that we make, also great.
I am just happy to be one of the animals on your ark.
You are my favorite animal. All right.
Okay, that was awesome. You can actually go back to work now.
Yay.